We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Kuf Yud. The Gemara begins 4 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues in a related discussion from the previous Daf on related to the halachas of mashkin, of security, as we'll see in today's Daf. For Israel throughout the entire world. So we discuss in today's Daf are mashkanta de surah. Mashkanta of the place Surah was a specific, unique type of security because the problem is when a person lends money and he gets security, he can't eat the pay risk because he's having, that'll be like a ribis on the loan. However, in Surah they figured out a way that they subtract from the amount of the loan by him eating pay risk. It's like in a way it's a win-win situation in regards to such a mashkanta. So the Gemara has a case that what happens if it said on the document just years, it didn't say how many, and the lender says it was for 3 years, and the borrower says for 2 years, and then he ate it for 3 years, and then the question of the Gemara is, whom do we say is the muhsik on that extra year that the lender ate it, and do we believe the lender when he says shtar ikrisli, he says, well, I lost my document, and I claim that it was for that amount of years. Other cases the Gemara talks about is Aris Balabais. The Gemara talks about a few cases of regarding who's the muhsik, as we just said regarding the mashkanta the surah. Same thing as sharecropper and the balabais, the employer. Who is believed to say if he got paid or not? Yishaim Balchayiv, regarding orphans and the creditor. As we said, these are all minam, and who do we believe? Some of the other terms, the concept of today's daf are ba'ara ibadam mislakinale, when you have to placate the individual, could you give him money or do you have to give him from the property itself? Shvius min aminyan. Let's say a person has a rental. Do we consider the shemitah from that count? Halacha b'schir yom v'layla, someone who's a day laborer or night laborer. Regarding the halacha of bal talin, which is the prohibition of not waiting overnight till you pay him. B'yomitin schar, the positive commandment of paying him on time, and bal tasha, which is a sub type of violation of don't delay of the payment in general. So begin the current Daf Kuf Yud, 4 lines down at the top of the Amud. The Gemara says Ahush. There was a document which is a document of a mashkanta de surah, which the Hava Ksiv Bey, it was written on it Shnin Stama. It just said unspecifically, when these years finish, then I'll get my security back. But it didn't say the amount of the years. Malva Mishalish, the lender said it was for 3 years, this agreement. Leiva Mishtayim, the bar said it was only for 2 years. Meaning when the years are up, then the lender gives back the property without any loan owed anymore. So what happens if Kadim Malva Vachlinu Leperi? What happens if the lender went and he ate the produce of the 3rd year before the borrower was able to take him to court? Minaman, who's believed to say how many years the security loan was for? So it's a machlekes in the Gemara. The Yudam says karka becheskes bala kayemas. He says that the property is in the muhsik, it's in the possession of its owner. So even though the owner, which is the borrower, doesn't claim the lender until after the lender already ate the payers, but we go based on the karka, which is where the payers are from. And therefore, when we're not sure regarding this 3rd year whose it belongs to, we would say that the ara is in the chazaka of its mari, of its owner, and therefore that by default means the lender ate it shalakedin, and therefore he would have to compensate the borrower who's the owner of the land. Rav Kahana says no peiris becheskes oichlein kaimi. The produce is in the possession of those who ate it, meaning in the lender. Since the lender already ate it, and you're coming to extract from him the money, that's a meitzimechaveroi. You have to bring a raya that it wasn't for 3 years, and that means we go based on the payers which was consumed by the lender. So that's a machlekes regarding, do we say, are we going on the muhsik of the karka, or going on the muhsik of the one who ate the payers? And says the Gemara, v'hilchas HaKavaseit Rav Kahana, the halacha follows Rav Kahana, that, as we just quoted, the Amay says, peiris becheskes achlein kaimi, that the produce is in the possession of the one who ate it. Says the Gemara, but v'kaimalon the hilchas hakavaseder of Nachman. How could we say this? But we know the halacha is when it comes to monetary law is like Rav Nachman. And Rav Nachman, the Amar, he says, Karka bechezkas baleo imedas, that the property is in the chazaka of its owner. Where do we find this? This is by a case of someone who rented a merchatz. He rented a bathhouse, and he said he's going to pay the owner 12 gulden a year for 1 gulden per month, which the Gemara brought already. This on Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis. So then the Gemara there said that even if, let's say, it's they end up making it into an Iber year. They add a month to the year. Even if he comes at the end of the month, still he says, we're going to say that it entirely goes to the owner and not to the one who was renting it. Because the karka is the cheskes baleha. So if that's the case, how could we rule like Rav Kahana that it's going to go to the lender, but the karka is muksik to the borrower, and it should be for him? So that says the Gemara, you're right. For sure we should go based on the karka like Rav Nachman. However, when did we say that? By a doubt which will never be verified, which is like Hassam over there. That's something we will never get to the bottom of it. Because what was the halacha we had like 8 blot before? We had this question regarding, do you go with Tafas Lashon Rishon, Tafas Lashon Achrin, which is when you say 12 gulden a year, 1 gulden a month, well, what do you do in this Iber, which is, there's a discrepancy between a year and per month, because he added on the extra month. So we weren't sure, do you go based on the first thing that he said and the last thing? That's not something we'll verify. That's a suffix of din that we have that won't come to clarity. So we'll never verify this, so we go based on the muksik of the karka. However, in the case we're discussing over here, this is something that will ultimately be verified. They will bring the witnesses of the document, and they will testify, and they will let us know how many years was it for. So although we're not sure right now, and he's saying this and he's saying this, we will ultimately verify it. So because of that, says the Gemara, "Vatruche beidina trei zimni," to make the court go through an effort 2 times, because maybe the halacha is with the lender, and if you're going to take it away from him because of the muksik of the karka of the borrower, we're going to end up having to take it away from the borrower again at a later point in time and give it back to the lender if it turns out he's right. So loy matrichinan, so that we don't make the court go through the effort. In other words, we'll leave it here by the lender until we verify otherwise, because remember, the lender already ate the payers of the 3rd year. So if you're going to say, no, first we're taking it away from you because the muksik of the karka, which is the borrower. Then we're going to verify and say, you know what, ends up turning out actually was 3 years. And then we're going to take it away from you, bring it back to the lender. Then we're not doing it, and therefore we leave it by the lender. Now, a different teaching the Gemara brings now regarding a lender and the borrower that come to the court, and Malva Eimer Chamish. The lender says that this was given to me as security for a period of 5 years, which we don't have the document in front of us right now. Loiva Eimer Shalish. The borrower says, no, it was only for 3 years. And by the way, you already ate the 3 years. So Amalei, so the lender says, the borrower says to the lender, he says, Aisli Shtarcha, show me your document. Remember, this karka is becheskes baleho. We know this property belongs to the borrower. But it was given as security to the lender. So the lender's claiming it was for 5 years. So he says, you know what, show me the document. So Amalei says, Shtar Yekrisli. Says, I lost the document. So Amar Rabbi Yehudi says, okay, you know what the halacha is? Malva Neman. The lenders believe that this security loan was for 5 years. You know why? He has a migui. A migui means to say that since I could have made a claim that would definitely win it for me, unbelievable what I'm saying right now. What's the migui? The boy Amar, if he wanted to say, he could have said Lekuchi biyadi. He could have said, I bought this from him. And you know what? Not only that, I've already had it for 3 years, which are years of chazaka, and I lost the document. And guess what? In halacha we know, as we'll learn in the next Masechta, Bava Metzia, 3 years is how much you have to hold on to it. So now he read it. Remember, the borrower is saying it was for 3 years and now you're done. He's saying no, it's for 5 years. We believe him that it's for 5 years because he could have said it's his forever. He could have said I bought it, and he would be believed because he's already had it for 3 years. And you're considered muksik after 3 years. So the fact that he doesn't have a document, you don't have to hold on to the document after 3 years. However, the Gemara does not agree to this. Amalei Popular Ravashi. He says, Rav Zvid v'Rav Avira lo yisvir lahu had Rabbi Yehuda. They don't hold of what Rabbi Yehuda just said. We do not say this migui because it's evident that this guy is being deceptive. My timer, what's the reason? I'll tell you why. He said he lost the document. You're right. It's very crafty because in general that works. But Haishtara, this document is not similar to documents of a sale because you're right. Whereas regarding a document of a sale, what's the point of that document? That point of the document is just as testimony that it was sold to him. That's what the deed is for. You think the guy has to be careful to hold on to the documents? He has to be one of these creeps that hold on to like a paper he had from 1976. He has to hold on to it in his basement in his files. He has to have everything. No, the Rabbanan say up until 3 years, a person is usually careful with his documentation. More than that, he doesn't have to be careful because he thinks, okay, the guy's not going to contest it anymore. It's already been 3 years. But over here, where the guy agrees that this document was really of being a mashkin of a security, the point of that documentation is to show how many years he gets to eat the pears for. Oh, so even the Legavainikai, since it's meant for collection, not as just as a raya, that he could continue eating the pears of that amount of years, mizazorebe. A person, of course, would be careful not to lose it until the amount of years, 5, 7, however much it is, that he claims it was for. This guy who says the irkas that it was lost, no, he's not believed because it must be umichbesh hu de kapshilishtage. He must be hiding the document. So he thinks, you know what? Let me squeeze him out another 2 more years. And he must be lying because he wouldn't be believed because the guy would not lose that document. Yes, a document of a sale, which is just for proof, for evidence, that a guy doesn't hold on to. It's just a receipt. Here, it's to show that he could collect, that he wouldn't lose, and therefore, actually, we would not believe the Malva according to Rav Zvid and Rav Avira. They disagree with the Migo that Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Now, the Gemara continues asking on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda had said that, yes, you could say Migui. If I wanted, I could have said I bought it because it's already been 3 years. Okay, believe me when I'm saying that it was just as a security, not for 3 years, but for 5 years, because I could have said that it was mine forever. However, Amalei Rabbeinu Rav Ashi says, I have a question on this. If that's the case, so then Haimash Ganta de Surah. This that we're describing, this what's called the security of Surah, which remember we said, and this is how Rashi, the Rashbam says this in Baba Basra, that it's a takana drabanan, this mashkanta, this security, because again, if someone is lending his friend on his field, it's forbidden for him to eat the pears because of ribis. But if you keep on diminishing the amount of the loan, like by mashkanta de surah, that the lender, let's say someone lends 10 mana on his field, and after 10 years, the property goes back for free, comes out that he was like acquiring the pears every single year with a mana, so that wouldn't be any problem of ribis. So what do you have, let's say, with this mashkin, the kasvi hachi? They write like this. B'mishlim shanaya ilan, at the end of these years, tipik ara double kesef. The property goes back to the borrower without any money owed. So, hecha the kavsh l'shtar mashkanta. What happens if the guy hides the document of the security? He says, I bought it. You think the guy would be believed? Meaning, this is the question we're asking on Rabbi Yehuda. He says, you have a migui. After 3 years, you could have said you bought it. So, the problem that the Gemara is asking is, meaning, yes, Rabbi Yehuda holds, yeah, you would be believed. But the problem, the way the Gemara is phrasing it, you think the Rabban would make a takana because this mashkanta was a takana to Rabban. The rabbis got involved and they wanted to make it a way that people would want to lend and have security and that it wouldn't be a problem about ribis. They instituted this mashkanta de surah. You think they're going to institute some milsa the asibila that could come to a loss because this could create a situation of deceptiveness where like the guy's going to say, oh, after 3 years, right, okay, great. So now I could make any claim. I could say that the security was for 20 years because I have the migui. But would the rabbis make something that you could create such an element of deceptiveness of Ramais? That wouldn't make sense. So Amalei says, no. Hasam tekinu l'Rabbanan, there the rabbis instituted, the Mori Arayov Taska, they instituted a clause that prevents this from happening. They made that the owner of the land, the borrower, he pays the taxes. And v'kari karya, he also fixes the ditches around the boundaries. So now he'll never be able to claim that he bought it because what's this guy doing digging over here and paying the taxes? If it's security, Okay, we realize it's just security for the loan. So the real owner, who's the borrower, is paying the taxes and he's also digging. No. If he sold it, why is the original owner, the borrower, paying taxes? So obviously the guy never bought it. You're right. If he wasn't, then the guy says, well, I had it for 3 years already. Look, I'm the only guy involved. I bought it. No, you can't. You didn't buy it because why is this guy doing all the work over here? Says, okay, good answer. But what do you do with our Delesler carrier? What happens if there's a land that there's no taxes and there's no digging, there's no ditches, and below you have task and there's no taxes? What would you say over there? So Malay says, you're right. Such a case, the original owner, the borrower, should have protested that you guys should know that I never sold it to him. It's just security by him. It's his responsibility. So the Gemara says, okay, lo imchamai. What happens if he doesn't protest? He caused a loss to himself. According to Rabbi Huda, that you have the migui. You're right. You should have made a protest and you didn't. Now the guy can make such a mikveh. He can make whatever claim he wants to. Similar type of a discussion about who's believed. Says the Gemara, Oris Oimer, a sharecropper, a guy owns a field and he's not willing to work. He doesn't like working, but he owns a lot of property. So he hires a guy, a yankala that comes along and says, I have no properties. I'll work your property. We'll split the profits. So the sharecropper says, La Metzia Daf. He says, I agreed to work your land because we said we're going 50-50. The owner of the property says, what are you talking about, yankala? L'shlisher additive. I only took him for a third of the profit. I could be half of my profits of my worthy land over here. We made up a third. Who's believed that it was? He says 50. He says a third. So it's a machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda says balabais neman. Off the bat, the balabais is believed to say that it was only for a third. Rav Nachman says no. Hakol k'minig medina. Everything goes according to the common custom. If the local custom is a third, then it's a third. If it's 50%, then it's 50%. Now, Savamina, they thought to say from this that loy pligi, that actually they're not disagreeing. How is that possible? Rav Nachman that says it's Kaminig Medina is Be'asa de Shokolari Sapalga. Is a place where generally the sharecropper takes 50%. And if that's the case, that's where we say it's like the Minig Medina, which would be 50%. Rabbi Huda is Be'asa de Shokolari Satilsa, is a place where the sharecropper generally takes a third. So he's believed to say that it was a third, because that is the Minig Medina. So they're basically saying the same thing. However, Amalu Rav Mari Barad the Bashmul, but Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, said, Hacham Abai. This is what Abai says. No, even the place where the sharecropper generally takes 50%, Pligi, they're disagreeing. And Rabbi Yehuda Amar, he still says, Balabais Neman, even though generally the common custom is 50%, but the homeowner is believed to say that he was only giving him a third. And because if he want to, and again, this goes back to a migui, he could have said, he wasn't my sharecropper. He could have said, Schiri, I had hired him for a certain amount of days or months or weeks, that I hired him for a certain amount of money, or Velakiti, or that he's the guy who's going to be my gatherer, and therefore, whenever we say, Rashi just points out, when we say what we believe the Balabais, that obviously means we give him the rabbinic shvuas hesses. He has to swear to that effect. But he could have claimed that he was just a hired hand, and therefore he gets just wages, but he doesn't get any of the profits. So because of that migui, when he's saying that, okay, he is a sharecropper, but we made him a third, we believe the Balabayas, even though the minig hamakom was to give 50%. A similar type of a discussion about who is believed. Yisaymim oimrim, orphans that say, Anu hishvachnu, our father who passed away, we have improved his property since his passing. Now, what's significant about that is that the creditors are not allowed to collect from what the orphans had made it better. So the orphans are claiming, we made it better. And the creditors say, no, your fathers had improved this field, and therefore it's part of what I could collect from. Question: who is the onus of proof on to say who made the improvement for what the collector could collect from and what not? So it's continued to be based. So Rabbi Chanina thought to say, what do you mean? The land, the property is in the possession of the orphans, and therefore we know whenever someone's a muhsik, the other one, so the creditor has to bring the proof to say that no, it was your father who did it, and not what you guys are claiming. However, this elder said to them, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. No, it's the onus of proof is on the orphans to bring proof. What's the reason? The land, and this is where it gets interesting about who's the muhsik. Even the legavaina kaima, property what we call the chasim sheshel machrayis. Since there's a creditor here, and it's meant for collection, so command the gavidam, it's like it's already collected. And therefore, Val Yisrael Levi Raya, actually the onus of proof is on the orphans to say that we made it better because it's already a collectible and he already has rights in it. And therefore, he's taking it. If you want to say that you made it better, you have to bring proof. And therefore, to the contrary, the Baal Chayv believed. And Amar Abaye says, we also learned this in Bava Metzia Daf Chavdalam Abayz regarding a tree that's planted within 50 amas of a city. The Mishnah teaches over there that it depends on what was first, the city or the tree. If the city was there first, the guy who owns the tree has to chop it down, and he doesn't get compensated for his tree. If the tree was there first, so then we chop it down, and he gets compensated. What happens, says the Mishnah, if Safik Zeh Kadam v'Safik Zeh Kadam? What happens if we're not sure which one was first? Was the tree there first? Was the city there first? So halacha is kaitzitz, we chop down the tree, ve'ein nice and dumb, and we don't compensate the owner of the tree. Says the Gemara, Alma, so we see kiven de make its kaima. Since either way you look at it, this tree is going to be cut down. As Rashi explains, what the Gemara is trying to say is that why are we anyways cutting down this tree? Because even if the tree was there before the city, still the Mishnah says you cut it down. The whole suffix that we have does not affect the fact that we're going to cut it down either way, because that you have to do. The whole suffix is, do we compensate you? Not for the cutting of the tree. And that's what Rashi explains why we're specifically talking about a city, because when you have a tree, let's say near someone's private pit, the Mishnah there also talks about the definite, when it's a definite situation, if the pit was there first, so we tell the guy to chop down his tree and we compensate him. If the tree is there first, we don't even chop it down. So there, when we have a suffix, which one's first, we say, okay, you don't chop it down. But obviously we see by the suffix regarding a tree near a city, that there the reason is because either way we're going to chop it down, and therefore, we tell him, look, I see Raya Vishkol. Bring a proof, and then you could collect your money. So what does the Gemara want to bring from here? What is Abaye trying to prove for Rabbi Yochanan's halacha? Hachanami, here also, whether the orphans made the property better since their father passed away, or whether the father made it before he passed away, either way, Haishtara, this document, Kivin L'Gavan Kaima, since the creditor is going to collect the property with the improvements, if the orphans made the improvements, so then yes, they'll have to get compensated, as we're going to mention shortly. But therefore, when the land has the improvements with it, either way, this guy is commanded gavidami. It's as if he collected already. Comes out, the orphans are trying to collect from the creditor, and therefore, therefore the onus of proof is on the orphans to bring a proof. In other words, what Abaye wanted is like you see over there the tree. Either way, look, we're cutting down your tree. Now, you want to get compensated or not? Now, the onus of proof is on you. That's something over here. Either way, this land is being taken by the creditor. You want to say you made the improvements? Okay, now you're the one that's trying to collect. And it's exactly like Rabbi Yochanan's halacha. Now, at the end, the Gemara tells us that actually, Aisu Yasmi Raya, the Inu Ashpachu. So the orphans brought proof that they had made the improvements. Okay, so fine. So now that they made the improvements, you're right, they do have to get compensated. But now the question is, Savar Reb Chanina, again, Reb Chanina thought to say, so when do we remove them? Meaning, what do we appease them with? What's their settlement? That we give them a small piece of the property according to the measurement of the value of the improvements that they made. Says the Gemara, but that's not the case. We actually remove them from this property with a monetary compensation, a payout. Mid Rav Nachman, and this comes from Rav Nachman's teaching. Rav Nachman he says, there's three individuals. We evaluate their improvements, and we remove them from the property bidamim, with money, and they don't take any part of the property itself. What are these three cases? So one case is b'chor lepashat. What that means to say is that we know the firstborn gets a double portion of the inheritance. Now, what happens if the father passed away and there's the firstborn, and let's say there's two sons that the father had. One is the firstborn, and one is a regular son. They made the property improvement. They worked on the field before they divided. So the Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf tells us that the firstborn does not take a double portion in the improvements that they had made the assets better after their father passed away. Why? That's what's called ro'u. Ro'u is what is going to come, but wasn't there at the time the father passed away. That improvement was not there when the father passed away. A firstborn does not take a double portion in ro'u, because the pasuk says, whatever you'll find with to the father when they pass away, and it wasn't there when the father passed away. So when they come to divide, so the firstborn is going to take a double portion of property which is already improved. And the problem is he's not supposed to get double in that improvement. So they evaluate the improvement, and then they give the regular son the quarter that's coming to him in the improvement that's in the portion of the firstborn son, so that he doesn't get a double portion in that. Now, regarding that case, that's case number one. Regarding that shaman es hashvach that we evaluate for the pashut, for the regular son to get from the firstborn who took that amount of property. And number two, the case of the Baal Chayv, uksubas isha liyisaimim, when you have a creditor or a woman collecting a ksuba from orphans. And case number three, Baal Chayv l'lukuches, which is the case of the creditor collecting from buyers, meaning if, let's say, a guy has an outstanding loan on a person that was before the documents of people who bought from him property. So the halacha is, so the creditor could collect from those lukuches, which is the collateral, including what they had made the improvements. Now, the thing is, but since they made the improvements, so we evaluate for them their improvements. And all these three cases, when you evaluate an improvement, you don't give them, says Rab Nachman, in the property itself, a piece of land, you give them the monetary value. Now, the reason for all these three cases is because from the beginning, this land was his, and therefore we don't force him to sell from his own karka because of the improvement if he has money to compensate, which the Gemara later on is going to explain for this last case that we're talking about for the creditor, that the karka is made from an apoitiki. Apoitiki means like it's his. It was designated for his collection. And same thing as the orphans, it's theirs. And so too the b'char, it's also his property. So even though there's a shaman, it's a shvach that we have to give to another party, that's done with money and is not done with the land itself. So the Gemara just explains, although Rabbi Chanina thought to say, now that the orphans were approved, that they had improved the property, that we're going to go and compensate it with land itself, no, like Rabbi Nachman says, that's one of the three cases that we're going to give them with money and not with land. However, Amalei Rabbeinu Rav Ashi says, "Lamem is this to say the Sabbath Shmuel that Shmuel holds that Baal Chayv l'lukuches, that when it comes from a creditor to a buyer, which are one of the three cases, that he even gives shvach in the first place, meaning the Gemara is asking on parenthetical to what we were discussing. Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, there's three cases that we evaluate the improvements. Now, the main thing we wanted the teaching was for the second half of that statement. But we compensate him with money, not with the actual property itself. Parenthetical from this teaching, one of the three cases of that we are shomen lanas shvach was when there's a creditor who's collecting from a buyer from his debtor. So he said, okay, the buyer who bought it didn't realize maybe that there's collateral on it, whatever it is, but he improved it. But now it's owed to a lender. So the lender gets to collect it, but we evaluate the shvach, and we just said that, however, misakin b'dam. Now the Gemara is asking on the premise of that whole teaching as it is. Does a creditor actually go and have the ability to take the shvach? Meaning, do we compensate, as the Gemara says, does the buyer get his improvements that we're evaluating it for? We're just saying that he gets money in that property itself. Is that so? But Shmuel said a different teaching that seems to contradict this. He says, Baal Chayv goyves shvach. He says, no, the creditor collects the improvement. So how could you say that it's the likeach who gets his improvements? Says the Gemara, maybe we're going to say likeach is not a difficulty. Khan, the teaching that Rav Nachman had told his name is Shmuel, was b'shvach hamagia liksafim, was improvement that already reaches a person's shoulders, meaning that it needs the property for very little, because If it didn't need the property at all, says Rashi, then actually we would consider it as peiros. It wouldn't even be considered as shvach, and the creditor collects only the shvach and not full-fledged peiros, as the Gemara said in the first parak on Daf Tezvav Maralef. So Rashi translated as doesn't literally mean to say that it's like peiros you actually hold on your shoulder, because that would be peiros, and that for sure the creditor wouldn't get. But it means to say like something very, like it doesn't need the land so much. And that's where we're saying that, that the shvach goes to the lekeach, we're just going to compensate him with money. But whereas the second teaching of Shmuel, that we're saying that no, the shvach goes to the creditor and it doesn't go to the lekeach, that's by shvach she'im magila kesafayim, that's by shvach that's not ready to be cut, it needs the land for a long time, it's considered like part of the property, and that's therefore the creditor will be able to take it. But how could you say that? But these are stories that happen every single day. That Kamagvi Shmuel, who we're discussing him, that he collected for the creditor even the type of improvements that in the short time are going to be ready to be taken and detached. And still, even over there, he says it goes to the creditor. So that seems to contradict the teaching of Nachman, who says that no, that the buyer gets that's improvement. Says it's not difficulty. Why not? It depends how much the creditor is owed. When did we say the second teaching of Shmuel that the creditor gets to collect the shvach? That's because he's owed. Let's say he was owed $5,000 and the property was bought for $3,000, but then the improvements that Lekech made was for another $2,000. Since that's the amount that the creditor is owed, he gets to collect the whole thing. But when did we say the first teaching of Rav Nachman that the improvement goes to the buyer is the lemasik be'shir v'shivcha, is when he's not owed that amount, and therefore that's excess, and that excess is not what he's owed. Therefore he cannot collect, and therefore that goes and it's compensated. Yes, he's going to take the property, obviously, but they have this $2,000 worth of improvement that he has to compensate the buyer for. On that, the Gemara asks, "V'chilemasik shir v'shivcha." Wait, if let's say he's not collecting the amount of the property and the improvements, well, you're telling me the yav leizuzil lekech. So okay. Then he gives money to the buyer, and then he removes him from the property. Well, this works well according to the one who says, which is Machlekes and Mesechta Ksubis, that if the buyer has money, the amount of the value of how much the debt is that the creditor is collecting his property for, that mandama holds, he cannot remove the creditor. No, the creditor could still say, you have bought the collateral, I am collecting that collateral, I don't want your money. So Shapir, that makes sense. You could say, okay, that this property from the beginning was the creditor's, and now it's the buyer who really is there without permission. So you could say that he takes his improvement with money and not with property, because since that is the amount that was owed of the land is owed to the creditor, and he's taking that. Now, you're right, he's not owed the amount of the improvement, so he'll compensate him with money. But according to the one who holds in Ksubis, that if the buyer has money, he could say to the creditor, hey, buddy, he could remove the creditor, but namely he could tell him, like, and so if he has money, he could just say, he pays him out. He says, let me hold on to what I bought, and I'm giving you money. If that's the case, he should be able to tell him, if I would have money, I would remove you from the whole property, because I would just pay up the debt that's owed to you from your debtor, who's the guy I bought from. So now that I don't have money, but at least give me a portion of land, but in the land, the amount of how much my improvements are, because you owe me that amount, and that's the amount of money that I have. So instead of you giving me that monetary value, according to that mandama, that the guy can give money and remove him, so at least let him remove him from the amount of how much his improvement was, and let him take land. Why are we saying that no, we can remove him with money and not land? Says Gemara, what we're talking over here, you're right, it's not a regular, according to that mandam, it's not a regular lekech and a regular bachayim. We're talking about when this creditor was told by his borrower, who is the one who sold this property, this is a poitiki, which means apoy tehei koi. This, when I owe you the money, you will always have a guarantee this land will be where you collect from. Where he says to him, your payment is only from this. That's already considered like the lenders, and even in such a situation that other mandam would agree that he cannot pay him out and remove him, and that's why we say that he could pay up the shvach, which is not what he's owed for, with money, and he does not have to give him a guriva da'ara, a piece of land. Now, of the next Mishnah, continue on this theme of our parak, the words hamakabel son mechaber are very familiar already. All these Mishnayos talk about that there's some type of a lease that a guy does with his friend's field. So if he leases it l'shvua echad for one shmita cycle, and he says, I'll pay you b'sheva zuz, 700 zuz. So hashvi is min minyan. So the shmita year is from the number of years of the shmita cycle, because it's obviously part of the shmita cycle. Now, however, kibla mena b'sheva shanim. Let's say he didn't say a shmita cycle. He didn't say shvua echad. He said, I'm going to lease it for 7 years. For 700 zuz. Then ein hashvi min minyan. Then Shemitah is not counted, obviously, because you can't really work the field on Shemitah. So it's not part of the 7 years. Obviously, it's part of the Shemitah cycle, but not part of 7 years. A related discussion, says the Gemara, it's going to be, yes, 8 years, yeah, but 7 years of work. Schir Yom, a guy who was hired where his work is for the daytime, and he leaves by the evening. Goiva kalalayla. So we're really segueing here into the sugya of Baltalan over here, about paying workers on time. So his collection is all night long. Now, that has relevancy whether for the shvua that the chamor mesakin, as we'll see later on, that a sacher, a laborer, an employee, he swears during the time of when he's owed money, and he collects. So that his collection time period is, if he worked during the day, is throughout the night. And it's also relevant regarding that the owner will not violate the Isra of Leisavil of Hashemesh, only of Leisalam Pula Sachar Itcha Ad Boiker, because there's two different psukim. One says you violate by sunset, one says you violate by sunrise. So it's saying that you only violate by sunrise because the time of when he's supposed to be collecting is throughout the night, and if you didn't pay throughout the night, when it's sunrise, then you violate the Isra of Baltan. So his collection is throughout the nighttime. Whereas Schir Laila, a guy who does the night shift, where he leaves his work in the morning, will go b'kalayim. His collection is throughout the entire day. Again, whether for the oath, which is during the time of your collection for that period, he swears and collects, or whether that the employer doesn't violate Baltalin, doesn't violate once it's sunrise, he only violates by Leisav Shemesh when sunset, as the Gemara will explain and bring the source for this. Now, what happens if someone's sacher shois? What happens if someone is he's hired to work a certain amount of hours, not for day or night, just hours? So his collection is actually the entire night and the entire day, which the Gemara is going to have a machlekes around how to explain this. Sacher Shabbos, if someone was hired for the week, or Sacher Chodesh, someone hired for the month, or Sacher Shana, someone hired for the year, or Sacher Shavuot, someone was hired for a Shemitah cycle. So here it depends when he finishes. Yatsa B'Yom, if his employment ended in the morning or during the daytime, so Goy B'Kol Yom, so then his collection is the entire daytime, and once the sun sets, the employer violates not paying him on time. Yatsa B'Layla, if let's say his employment stopped, let's say at midnight, so Goy B'Kol Layla B'Kol Yom, so he collects all night and the following day. The reason for this is because since his employment continued when it was already dark, so essentially he's a schir laila, he's a night laborer. A night laborer, you don't violate when it comes to the morning up until the following day at sunset, and therefore that's why his collection is that night, the entire night, and the following day. Now the Gemara brings a brisa to elaborate and explain the halacha of our Mishnah. Minayin l'sachar yem. Where do we know from that a person who is a day laborer should go b'kol halayla? So you have a guy, he's working for you, you're doing construction, and he's your foreman, and he gets paid by the day. How do you know that the collection period is the entire night? Says the pasuk in Yikra. Says leisalam pu'ula sachar itchad boiker, that you should not let it stay overnight, the work of your employee with you up until the morning. Which means to say, by morning time, you have to have paid him already. Now, the other half of the Allah of our Mishnah. How do you know a guy's a night laborer? So this is a nurse who comes to your house and she watches over the baby with the feeding tube. How do we know that if she gets paid, she's a night laborer, that her collection is throughout the entire day? That means you don't have to pay her when she leaves in the morning. You have till tomorrow night to pay her. It says a pasuk in Devarim. It says during his day he'll give his wages. So, which means to say that you have the whole day to pay the wages. So, how do you know this? Why didn't you say the opposite? Why didn't you say loy sullen, that it shouldn't be the entire night till the morning? Once it's morning, you violate. Why didn't you say that's by night labor? The person worked all night; they get paid right when they're finished. And maybe the pasuk loy savai, which is that you violate by sunset, is the guy who worked the whole day. The guy works; he should get right when he's finished. How do you know? Maybe say the opposite. Says Gemara, no, it's not true because shiur is in the mishtalemes ila b'sayf. We know the Talmudic dictum that when it comes to employment, the payment is only owed at the end. As the Gemara said in the age of Neshach, Daf Samachem and Aleph, that we learned from the pasuk Kischir Shana B'Shana that the schiris of this year is actually paid in the beginning of the following year because it's only owed when you're done the job. So obviously, you're not indebted to your day laborer until it only starts by sunset, because he only finished then. So therefore, when the pasuk says leisavai, that make sure it didn't come sunset and you paid him already, obviously it must be talking about a guy who worked all night, which then you became obligated only in the morning when he finished his job, and then you have the daytime to pay him till it's sunset. So to leisalin is also, you cannot explain that it's by a guy who worked all night because you're not obligated to him till the morning, and then you have all day to pay him for the job that he did. So you have a time period to pay him. It can't be during his employment because you don't even owe him until he's actually done the job. So I'm going to learn the Brisa, continuing to further explain this teaching. From the fact that it says in the pasuk that the work of your employee should not remain with you up until overnight till the morning. So if it says loy salam, don't leave it overnight. Don't I know overnight means till the morning? Because lina means until the morning. As says a pasuk in Shemais Lamadab, lo yolin la biker, don't leave it over till the morning. Every lean in the pasuk means laying overnight. So then, matam alamad biker, what does the pasuk teach with the extra, seemingly superfluous words till the morning? Obviously, overnight means till the morning. So Malama comes to teach you she'ina over elad biker rishon b'vat, to teach you that yes, the Isser Baltalan is only the first morning. That's when you violate. So says the Gemara, what's after that? You're right. You're not going to violate any more Baltalan if you don't pay the next day and the next day and the next day. But Amarav, he says, but you'll still violate an Issa Drabanan of not to delay payment. Which Amarav says in my Kara, what's a pasuk? Meaning, where do we find this rabbinic Issa of not delaying payment alluded to in the pasuk? It's a pasuk in Mishlei. I'll tell you, don't tell your friend, Leich v'shuv, go and come back, and tomorrow I'll give it to you. And you have the money with you. So you're just delaying the guy. That is rabbinic Isra Baltasha, but the biblical Isra of Baltal is really only the first moment, whether it be sunrise or sunset, depends if the person's a day or a night labor. That's the time. If you missed that, you missed it already. You're not going to violate anymore, but there's still the rabbinic Isra of Baltasha. Now the Gemara continues.
Today,
Say the end of what?
pay workers week today.
Yeah. That's when the schiris ends. So we said a case of schar chaydish, schar shavua, schar Shabbos. Guys,
once it's understood,
that's what. Yeah, exactly. When. Yeah, it's we're talking about biblical mitzvah that you have that a person has to always pay on time. Yeah.
But it's not a day laborer.
Somebody takes a day laborer, finish his work, give him his pay.
All I'm suggesting is a passive. It says
Pasuk refers to a day laborer.
a moment late.
Well, the moment you have a whole day or night period to generally to get the money to pay it up to him. So in the Brisa, let's just do this next piece. We'll see that if someone says to his friend, say, go out, hire me workers. Both of them don't violate Baltalan. Why don't they violate Baltalan? So he says, the owner, the employer didn't hire them. The headhunter hired them. So you don't call it like this, like as if this sacher is by him, because he didn't hire him. And at the same time, as we continue to have Kafir Alpha and Aleph, but the guy who hired him, the work is not being done for him, so you can't consider it pula sa'itzcha. Meaning, Rashi is showing you the words of the pasuk are leisalan pula sacher itcha ad baiker. So you don't have the sacher for the owner because he didn't hire him, and you don't have the other guy to have pula sa'itzcha because he's not working for him. So when a guy asks someone else to hire workers for him, he will not be violating about Talmud if he doesn't pay him on time. So the Gemara says, "Hey, what's the case talking about?" And that is, idam alahu, if he tells them, "Scharchem alai," if the headhunter says, "I'm going to pay you," so then schari alavus, and actually he does have to pay them, and therefore it would be pula sacher itcha, because he has the obligation to pay them, as the Gemara said. The time we learned the brayso. Someone hires a worker to work on his own property, but he actually showed him his friend's property when he hired them to do work. So he has to pay them the full amount. So then he goes back and he collects from the homeowner what he benefited him. But we see that the responsibility is on the guy who hired. So why would he not have to pay them and then pay them on time? So he said to them, he says, "Look, I'm hiring you guys, but the payment of the wages is on the employer." So therefore, again, there you have sacher by the hirer, and you have pula itcha by the owner, and therefore neither of them are going to violate it because neither of them have the whole pasuk in there. And the Gemara brings a story that Yehuda b'Mereimer Omalei l'Shamei, he said to his attendant, "Zil ogerli poilim, go hire for me workers." The Imam would tell them, "Scharchem balabais," that your wages is on the homeowner, on the employer, and therefore he was doing this, that if I don't pay them on time, I'm not going to be violating by having you hire them. It's going to be this, neither one of us is going to violate because you don't have sacher for the owner and there's no pula sitcha for the guy who hired them. So the Merima Mazutra Agri Ladadi, what they would do is, when one of them needed workers, his friend would go and make up the price with the worker, and then he would tell the worker that my friend will pay you. So therefore, neither of them would be violating the Isra Bal Talan. And Amar Rabbi Huna, he says, Hani Shukoi Desura. He says that the Balabatim of Surah, which they wouldn't get the money that they didn't have liquid cash until the market day. So their Loi Avri, they don't violate for the wages of their workers, Mishum Bal Talan, even though they finished their day job. Why? They know they know that everyone needs the money that they get in the market day to get money. So therefore, even, says Rashi Chiddush, even if the employer happens to have money, he's not going to violate, because when the worker hired himself out, he knows from day number one that it's only going to be by market day when boss has money to pay up all the workers. So therefore, once the first day he's not violating, so actually he's not going to violate it anymore, as the Gemara said this on the previous daf, that you only violate the first morning. So once you're not violating anymore, because you don't have to pay them the first morning, because they know you only get money by the Yom of the Shukah, so now you're not going to violate anymore anytime. But says the Gemara, you're for sure going to violate the rabbinic prohibition from market day and on, when you do have money, and then you could pay him by just pushing him off. So then that's going to be inappropriate. It's a rabbinic issue of don't tell the guy to go come back later when you have money to pay him. Thank you to any time.